The stars were burning out one by one, and Jake Morrison knew humanity was losing the war. He stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, the last human warship still fighting in the outer colonies. Through the thick glass windows, he could see the wreckage of his fleet floating in space like broken toys. 12 ships had started this battle. Now only his remained. "Commander, we're getting a signal from New Austin Colony," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. Her voice was tired. They had all been tired for months now. Jake turned away from the window. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was cracked with static and fear. "This is Colonel Davis from New Austin. The aliens broke through our last defense line. We're evacuating what civilians we can, but the ships, most of our evacuation ships are gone." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. New Austin had 2 million people. Had. How many got out? He asked. Maybe 200,000 in the escape pods. The rest. The transmission cut to static. Amy looked at her instruments. "The colony's main transmitter just went dark, sir." Jake nodded slowly. Another human world was dead. In 3 years of war against the Kethmori Empire, this had become normal. The aliens came, they destroyed everything, and they moved on to the next target. On the planet Kronos base, far across the solar system, Colonel Lisa Harper was watching her own screens with growing worry. The Fortress world was humanity's strongest military base, but even she knew it would not be enough. "The enemy fleet is bigger than we thought," said Major Pete Sullivan, standing beside her in the command center. "Our scouts count 500 alien ships heading this way." Lisa felt her stomach drop. 500 ships. Her entire defense force had maybe 50 vessels, and most of those were damaged from previous battles. "How long until they get here?" she asked. 72 hours, Pete replied. "Maybe less if they push their engines hard." Lisa looked around the command center. Young soldiers sat at their stations trying to look brave. Most of them had never seen their home worlds. Most of them never would. The Kethmori were not like humans. They were taller, with gray skin and black eyes that showed no emotion. They had better weapons, better ships, and better technology. Worst of all, they had conquered dozens of other alien species before finding Earth. They knew how to destroy entire civilizations. Their leader, War Prime Zethkar, had sent a message to every human colony after the first battles. The message was simple: surrender now or be wiped out completely. When humans refused, the killing began. Back on Earth, in the deep underground bunkers beneath the capital, President Victoria Stone was receiving the worst news of her life. Ambassador Chen Wei sat across from her desk, his face gray with exhaustion. He had just returned from the Galactic Council, humanity's last hope for help in the war. "They voted to withdraw all support," Chen said quietly. "The council members say we're a lost cause. Too many of their own people have died helping us." Victoria stared at the papers on her desk. Reports of destroyed colonies, casualty numbers that made no sense, they were so high, and now this. "So we're alone," she said. "Yes, Madam President, we're alone." In space above Kronos base, Captain Danny Wright was checking his weapons for the 3rd time that hour. His Marine battalion was dug into the defensive positions on the planet's surface, waiting for the alien invasion that everyone knew was coming. "You think we can hold them?" asked Sergeant Maria Santos, cleaning her rifle nearby. Danny looked up at the stars where enemy ships would soon appear. "We have to try." But privately, he knew the truth. Every military analyst, every computer, simulation, every strategic report said the same thing. Humanity would lose this war. The only question was how long they could delay the end. The Kethmori had advantages in every area. Their plasma weapons could cut through human armor like paper. Their ships had shields that bounced off most human bullets and missiles. Their soldiers were stronger and faster than humans. Most importantly, they had won wars like this before. 43 different alien species had fought the Kethmori Empire. All 43 had lost. Their worlds were now empty or filled with Kethmori colonists. Dr. Elena Foster knew these facts better than anyone. In her research lab on Earth, she had studied every battle, every defeat, every desperate last stand. She was trying to find something, anything that might help humanity survive. The pattern is always the same, she told her assistant while looking at battle recordings. The aliens attack with overwhelming force. The defending species fights back with conventional military tactics. When their organized armies are destroyed, they surrender. Her assistant nodded. Makes sense. Why keep fighting when you can't win? Dr. Foster paused the recording. On the screen, alien soldiers were walking through the ruins of a city that had belonged to a species called the Veltar. The Veltar had surrendered after their main fleet was destroyed. Within a year, their entire species was extinct. But what if you don't surrender? She asked quietly. Chief Engineer Roy Mitchell was asking himself the same question on Haven's Gate, the industrial moon that supplied most of humanity's war materials. His factories were running day and night, building weapons and ships as fast as possible, but it was not fast enough. We're not going to outproduce them, he told his team during their daily meeting. They have the resources of 100 conquered worlds. We have what's left of 12 human colonies. Susan Clark, his best technician, raised her hand. What if we stop trying to match their technology? What if we focus on what we can build, fast and cheap? Roy thought about this. Human factories were good at making simple things quickly. They had been doing it since before they reached the stars. Meanwhile, in the deep space between stars, War Prime Zethkar was reviewing the final battle plans aboard his flagship. The massive alien vessel was larger than most human cities, filled with weapons that could destroy planets. The humans will break like all the others, he told his officers. Their organized resistance will collapse within days. After that, we begin the cleansing protocols. The cleansing protocols were simple. Kill everything human. Destroy every human building, every human ship, every human settlement. Leave nothing that could remember humanity had ever existed. It had worked 43 times before. Back on the E. Defiant, Jake Morrison was studying the tactical displays when Amy called out from her station. Sir, I'm picking up massive energy signatures. The main Keth Mori fleet just dropped out of hyperspace near chronospace. Jake looked at the display. Hundreds of red dots appeared on the screen, each one representing an alien warship. His single ship looked very small in comparison. Signal all remaining human forces, he ordered. Tell them this is it. This is where we make our stand. Amy's fingers moved over her controls. Message sent, sir. Jake stared at the tactical display, knowing that in 72 hours the final battle for humanity would begin. Every computer model said they would lose. Every military expert agreed defeat was certain. But as Jake looked around his bridge at the tired faces of his crew, he realized something. The computers and experts had never met humans like these. Humans who had watched their worlds burn and kept fighting. Humans who faced impossible odds and refused to give up. Maybe defeat was certain. But Jake Morrison decided that if humanity was going to die, they would die fighting. The first alien plasma beam cut through the morning sky like a green sword of death. Captain Danny Wright watched from his bunker as the massive energy blast hit the outer defense walls of chronospace. The concrete and steel barriers built to stop any known weapon simply vanished. Nothing was left but glowing metal and smoke. All units, this is it. Danny spoke into his radio. The attack has started. Above him, alien ships filled the sky. They moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting no light. Each ship was the size of a city block, and there were hundreds of them. Another plasma beam struck near Danny's position. The ground shook so hard that several of his Marines fell down. Corporal Ben Taylor got back up, his face covered in dirt. Sir, our anti-aircraft guns aren't even scratching their shields, Ben reported. The shells just bounce off. Danny had expected this. Human weapons were designed to fight other humans, not aliens with technology, hundreds of years more advanced. But he had to try something. Switch to armor-piercing rounds, he ordered. Concentrate all fire on the smallest ships. The human gunners did as ordered, but it made no difference. The alien shields glowed briefly when hit, then returned to normal. Meanwhile, The plasma beams kept falling like rain, turning defensive positions into smoking craters. In space above the planet, Admiral Jake Morrison was learning the same hard lesson. His ship, the Defiant, fired everything it had at the alien fleet, missiles, energy weapons, even the old-fashioned explosive shells. Direct hits on 3 enemy vessels, reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. No damage visible. Jake watched the tactical display with growing despair. His weapons were like throwing rocks at a tank. Meanwhile, the alien return fire was tearing his ship apart piece by piece. Hull breach on Deck 7, Amy called out. Emergency bulkheads are holding. Engineering reports main engines at 60% power, added another officer. Jake knew his ship was dying, but he also knew that every minute he kept the aliens busy was another minute for the people on the planet below. Down on Kronos base, Colonel Lisa Harper was coordinating the defense from her underground command center. The reports coming in were all bad. Sector 7 has fallen, Major Pete Sullivan announced. Captain Wright's battalion is pulling back to secondary positions. What about the Eastern Defense Line? Lisa asked. Gone. The plasma bombardment destroyed everything in the first 10 minutes. Lisa looked at the tactical map. Red markers showed where alien forces were landing. Blue markers showed human positions. There were far more red markers than blue ones. Colonel, we have a communication from Earth, said a young lieutenant. The voice of President Victoria Stone came through the speakers, crackling with static from the jamming systems the aliens were using. Lisa, I need to know your honest assessment. How long can you hold? Lisa looked around the command center. Her officers were working frantically, but she could see the fear in their eyes. The walls shook again as another plasma blast hit nearby. Maybe 6 hours with conventional tactics, she replied. Maybe less. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then President Stone spoke again. Then it's time for Protocol Omega. Lisa felt her blood turn cold. Protocol Omega was a plan that nobody wanted to use. It meant abandoning organized military operations and breaking the army into small groups that would fight like guerrillas. It meant admitting that the regular war was already lost. Are you sure, Madam President? I'm sure. Activate Protocol Omega immediately. Lisa turned to Pete. You heard her. Send the activation codes to all remaining units. Within minutes, radio messages were going out to every human soldier still fighting. The messages were short and simple. Forget the rule book. Forget military formations. Forget everything you learned in training. Do whatever it takes to hurt the enemy. Sergeant Maria Santos received the message while hiding in the ruins of what used to be a supply depot. Half of her squad was dead, and the other half was wounded. Under normal military rules, they should surrender or retreat. But Protocol Omega said there were no normal rules anymore. What does this mean, Sergeant? Asked Private Kevin Walsh, the youngest member of her squad. Maria looked at the alien ships landing in the distance. Troops were pouring out of them, gray-skinned soldiers with weapons that could cut a human in half. It means we stop fighting like soldiers, she said, and we start fighting like humans. On the other side of the base, Chief Engineer Roy Mitchell was getting the same message in his workshop. He had been trying to repair damaged weapons and vehicles, but now he had new orders. Susan, Tony, drop what you're doing, he called to his assistants. We're not fixing equipment anymore, we're making weapons. Susan Clark looked confused. What kind of weapons, Chief? Roy looked around his workshop. It was filled with industrial equipment, mining tools, construction supplies, and chemical containers. Things that were never meant to be weapons. The kind that aliens won't expect, he said with a grim smile. Back in space, Jake Morrison was fighting a losing battle when he received the Protocol Omega activation. His ship was barely holding together, and the alien fleet was preparing to finish him off. All crew members, this is the Admiral, he announced over the ship's communication system. We just received new orders. We're no longer fighting a conventional space battle. Amy looked at him with confusion. Sir, what else can we do? We're outnumbered 100 to 1. Jake studied the tactical display. The aliens were fighting exactly the way their military manuals said they should. Perfect formations, overwhelming firepower, textbook strategy. We're going to do something they won't expect, he said. We're going to ram them. The bridge went silent. Ramming an enemy ship was suicide. something that only happened in desperate last stands. "Sir, are you sure?" Amy asked quietly. Jake looked at the alien flagship on his screen. It was massive, probably carrying thousands of enemy soldiers and enough weapons to destroy a planet. "Set course for their command ship," he ordered. "Maximum speed." Meanwhile, down on the planet, the guerrilla war was already beginning. Captain Danny Wright had abandoned his bunker and was moving through the ruins with a small group of Marines. They came across a group of alien soldiers setting up some kind of communication equipment. The aliens were bigger than humans, with thick gray skin that looked like armor. Their weapons hummed with energy. Under normal military tactics, Danny's small group would avoid the larger alien force. But Protocol Omega had different rules. "Corporal Taylor, do you still have those mining charges from the supply depot?" Danny whispered. Ben Taylor nodded, patting a bag full of industrial explosives. "Good. We're going to show these aliens what happens when humans get creative." In her laboratory on Earth, Dr. Elena Foster was analyzing the first battle reports from Kronos Base. The numbers were terrible. Human forces were being destroyed at a rate of 10 to 1. Conventional military wisdom said the battle was already over. But something else was happening. Small groups of human soldiers were continuing to fight even after their main units were destroyed. They were using tactics that weren't in any military manual. "This is interesting," she told her assistant. "Look at these reports. Humans are fighting in ways that don't make logical sense." Her assistant read over the data. "They're taking casualties they can't afford, attacking when they're outnumbered, refusing to retreat when they should." Dr. Foster nodded. "Exactly. And somehow it's working. The alien advance is slowing down." She pulled up psychological profiles of the human soldiers. Most other alien species, when faced with overwhelming odds, would surrender to preserve their lives. It was the logical thing to do. But humans, she was beginning to realize, didn't always do the logical thing. High above the planet, Admiral Morrison's ship was accelerating toward the alien flagship. His crew had sealed themselves into their stations, knowing they probably wouldn't survive the impact. 30 seconds to collision, Amy reported, her voice steady despite what was happening. Through the view screen, Jake could see the alien ship, growing larger. Its weapons were firing at the Defiant, tearing holes in the human vessel, but it was too late to stop them now. "All crew, brace for impact," Jake announced. The two ships collided in a flash of light visible from the planet's surface. The alien flagship's shields failed under the impact, and the Defiant's reinforced hull punched deep into the enemy vessel. Both ships exploded, lighting up the dark sky like a new star. On the ground, human soldiers cheered when they saw the explosion. They were still outnumbered, still outgunned, and still losing the war. But for the first time, they had hurt the aliens back. The guerrilla war had begun. Staff Sergeant Carlos Rivera crouched in the darkness, watching 12 alien soldiers set up their camp. They thought they were safe behind their energy shields and advanced weapons. They were wrong. Carlos had been hiding in the ruins of Supply, Depot 9 for 3 days, eating cold rations and drinking muddy water. His squad was gone, his officers were dead, and according to every military manual ever written, he should surrender. Instead, he was planning to kill every alien in that camp. The mining charges Roy Mitchell had built were crude but effective. Carlos had strapped them to a remote-controlled supply drone, the kind used to deliver food to construction workers. The aliens wouldn't recognize it as a weapon until it was too late. He pressed the activation button on his control device. The little drone hummed to life and began moving toward the alien camp, looking like nothing more than a piece of flying junk. The aliens noticed it but didn't seem concerned. Their energy weapons could destroy anything dangerous long before it reached them. What harm could an old supply drone do? Carlos smiled grimly as the drone reached the center of their camp. He pressed the detonation button. The explosion lit up the night sky. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of the alien camp but a smoking crater. Carlos picked up his rifle and moved to his next target. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out everywhere. Humans were fighting, in ways that made no military sense, and somehow it was working. Corporal Helen Brooks had been cut off from her unit for 2 days. She was wounded, hungry, and down to her last few bullets. Any reasonable soldier would have found a place to hide and wait for rescue. Instead, Helen had turned a collapsed overpass into a fortress of death. She had used rubble to create choke points, forcing the aliens to move through narrow passages. She had rigged explosive traps using emergency flares and medical supplies. Most importantly, she had positioned herself where she could hold off an entire alien patrol with nothing but determination and a handful of bullets. "Come on," she whispered to herself as another group of aliens approached her position. "Let's see how tough you really are." The aliens advanced in perfect formation, their weapons ready. They expected to find either a large human force or an empty position. They found Helen Brooks with a rifle and 18 hours of pure stubbornness. The first alien fell to a headshot. The second stepped on one of her improvised mines. The third and fourth died when Helen triggered a controlled collapse that brought tons of concrete down on their heads. By the time the alien patrol retreated, Helen had held her position for another 6 hours and allowed 300 human civilians to escape through the tunnels behind her. Dr. Elena Foster was studying combat recordings in her laboratory when she noticed something strange. Human soldiers were performing far better than their training and equipment should have allowed. Private Kevin Walsh was a perfect example. He had been a supply clerk before the war, with minimal combat training. Now he was moving through alien-controlled territory like a ghost, surviving on contaminated water and destroyed rations while conducting hit-and-run attacks. "Look at this footage," she told her assistant. "This soldier has been in enemy territory for 6 days. He should be dead from radiation poisoning, dehydration, or simple exhaustion." Her assistant watched the grainy video feed from Kevin's helmet. Camera. The young private was setting up an ambush using nothing but wire, explosives, and pieces of broken metal. "How is he still functioning?" the assistant asked. Dr. Foster was beginning to understand. Humans under extreme stress don't just survive. They adapt. They get stronger. She pulled up more files. Soldiers fighting for days without sleep. Marines continuing to fight with wounds that should have been fatal. Engineers building weapons from garbage and kitchen supplies. We're not like other species, she realized. When other aliens face impossible odds, they surrender because it's logical. When humans face impossible odds, they get angry. In the alien command ship orbiting the planet, War Prime Zethkar was receiving reports that made no sense. His forces should have completed the conquest in a matter of hours. Instead, the fighting was getting worse. "Explain this to me," he demanded, of Commander Yethmore, his chief military advisor. "We have destroyed their organized armies. We have superior weapons and numbers. Why is this taking so long?" Commander Yethmore looked uncomfortable. "The humans are not fighting according to standard military doctrine, War Prime. They continue to resist even after suffering unacceptable casualties." "What do you mean?" "For example, we destroyed a human supply depot yesterday. Our forces moved in to secure the area. A single human soldier killed 12 of our troops using improvised explosives before we could eliminate him." Zethkar's black eyes narrowed. "One human killed 12 of our soldiers?" "Yes, War Prime. And this is not an isolated incident. Human resistance fighters are using weapons we did not recognize as weapons. Kitchen knives, construction equipment, even medical supplies have been turned into instruments of war." This was completely outside Zethkar's experience. In 43 previous conquests, enemy resistance had collapsed once their military was defeated. Civilians and surviving soldiers had surrendered rather than face certain death. But humans were different. They seemed to fight harder when things got worse. Back on the ground, Captain Danny Wright was discovering just how different humans could be. His Marine battalion had been reduced to 30 men, but instead of feeling defeated, they were more determined than ever. "Chief Mitchell's workshop is producing some interesting equipment," reported Corporal Ben Taylor, carrying a strange-looking device. "What is it?" Danny asked. "He calls it a plasma cutter mine. It's made from mining equipment and power cells. When an alien steps on it, it cuts through their leg armor like butter." Danny examined the device. It was crude, ugly, and probably violated every safety regulation ever written. It was also brilliantly effective. How many of these can he make? He says his team can produce 50 a day using scrap metal and stolen alien power cells. Danny smiled. This was exactly the kind of creative thinking that Protocol Omega was designed to encourage. Instead of trying to match alien technology, humans were using their own strengths. Chief Engineer Roy Mitchell was indeed working around the clock in his makeshift workshop. With the help of Susan Clark and Tony Garcia, he had turned the place into a weapons factory that would have horrified any safety inspector. The beauty of these devices, he explained to his team, is that the aliens don't recognize them as weapons until it's too late. Susan held up what looked like a children's toy. This one? Remote-controlled explosive. Looks like a broken entertainment device, but it carries enough explosive to destroy an alien vehicle. Tony was working on something that resembled a garden tool. And this? Plasma lance. Designed to look like agricultural equipment. It can punch through alien armor at close range. The aliens had advanced technology, but they also had rigid thinking. They expected weapons to look like weapons, vehicles to look like vehicles, and soldiers to look like soldiers. Humans were throwing out all those assumptions. Meanwhile, the psychological effect of guerrilla warfare was spreading through the alien forces. Soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds were now afraid to leave their camps. Every piece of human debris could be a weapon. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Commander Yethmore was receiving constant reports of alien casualties from attacks that should have been impossible. A construction mech had been converted into a walking fortress that destroyed 3 alien tanks before being stopped. A food processing plant had been turned into a chemical weapons factory. Even human children were building booby traps using school supplies. The humans are fighting with everything they have, he reported to War Prime Zethkar. They are not distinguishing between military and civilian resources. Everything is a weapon to them. Zethkar was beginning to feel something he had never experienced in 200 years of conquest. Uncertainty. What do you recommend? He asked. We could increase the pace of extermination operations. Kill everything human. Destroy every human structure. Leave nothing that could threaten us. But even as he said it, Yethmore knew it wouldn't be that simple. The humans weren't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the right to exist. And that made them far more dangerous than any enemy the Kethmori had faced before. In a collapsed building near the center of Kronos Base, Sergeant Maria Santos was teaching her surviving squad members a new kind of warfare. Forget everything you learned in basic training, she told them. The aliens expect us to fight like soldiers. Instead, we're going to fight like humans. Private Kevin Walsh, now a veteran of 6 days behind enemy lines, nodded. What's the difference? Maria picked up a piece of broken glass and a roll of medical tape. Soldiers use proper weapons, humans use whatever works. She wrapped the glass in tape, creating a crude but effective blade. Soldiers follow rules. Humans make their own rules. She pointed toward the alien patrol moving through the streets below. Soldiers surrender when they're outnumbered. Humans get creative. As night fell over the burning ruins of Kronos Base, something new was happening in the war between humans and aliens. The organized battle was over, and the humans had lost, but the real fight was just beginning. Major Pete Sullivan crouched in the shadows of a destroyed building, watching the alien commander through his binoculars. The gray-skinned officer was directing the execution of human prisoners in the town square below. Pete counted 12 humans, kneeling in a line, their hands tied behind their backs. Alien soldiers stood behind them with energy weapons raised. A camera was recording everything. This is War Prime Zethkar speaking to all human forces, the alien commander announced in perfect English. You see what happens to those who resist the Kethmori Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Pete watched as the alien soldiers fired. 12 flashes of green light. 12 human lives ended. The message was broadcast to every human radio frequency, every television channel, every communication device still working on 3 different planets. The aliens expected this show of force to break human morale and end the resistance. They were wrong. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Patterson received the broadcast in her hidden command post deep in the mountains of Haven's Gate. She had been coordinating, guerrilla attacks across the solar system. But now she had a new mission. All resistance cells, this is command, she spoke into her radio. New orders. Every alien officer is now a priority target. No prisoners. No mercy. The response came back from dozens of different locations. Human voices, tired but angry. Very angry. Copy that command. It's time to show them what happens when you murder our people. Within hours, the systematic assassination of alien leadership began. Master Sergeant Luke Thompson led a team that infiltrated an alien supply base and eliminated 3 commanders using nothing but knives and determination. They left no witnesses. Across the war zone, similar attacks were happening. Alien officers, who had felt safe behind their technology and superior numbers, suddenly found themselves hunted by humans who seemed to appear from nowhere. The psychological warfare was working both ways now, but humans were much better at it. Chief Engineer Roy Mitchell had made another breakthrough in his improvised weapons program. His team had discovered that human construction equipment, when properly modified, could punch through alien shields using sheer kinetic force. The aliens designed their shields to stop energy weapons and explosive projectiles, he explained, to Susan Clark and Tony Garcia. But they never considered a mining drill moving at 200 miles per hour. They had converted a dozen construction mechs into assault vehicles. The machines looked harmless enough, like oversized construction equipment, but they carried mining lasers, plasma cutters, and hydraulic rams that could crush an alien tank. The beauty of it, Roy continued, is that we're not trying to out-tech them. We're using simple physics. Force equals mass times acceleration, and we've got a lot of mass moving very fast. The first field test came when an alien patrol encountered what looked like a broken-down construction mech by the side of the road. The aliens approached to investigate, thinking it might contain useful salvage. Instead, the mech suddenly came to life. Its mining laser carved through the alien vehicles like paper. Its hydraulic arms crushed anything that got too close. By the time the attack was over, the entire alien patrol was destroyed. Dr. Elena Foster was documenting these changes in human behavior from her laboratory on Earth. Her research was revealing something extraordinary about human psychology under extreme stress. Look at these coordination patterns, she told her assistant, pointing to combat footage. Soldiers who have never worked together before are operating in perfect synchronization. The assistant watched as Sergeant Rachel Adams and Corporal Mike Johnson moved through an alien stronghold. They seemed to know exactly what the other was thinking, communicating without words or radio signals. How is that possible? The assistant asked. I think humans develop enhanced group awareness when faced with survival situations, Dr. Foster explained. It's like they become a single organism with multiple bodies. This phenomenon was happening everywhere. Human resistance fighters were coordinating attacks across vast distances with no central command. They were sharing resources, information, and tactics as if they had a telepathic connection. The aliens had never encountered anything like it. In the alien command ship, War Prime, Zethkar was facing the first military crisis of his career. His forces controlled most of the territory, but they were taking casualties at an unacceptable rate. How many officers have we lost this week? He asked Commander Yethmore. 47, War Prime. All killed in targeted assassinations. Zethkar's anger was growing. And our ground forces? We lose approximately 50 soldiers per day to improvised attacks. The humans are using tactics we have never seen before. The reports coming in were unlike anything in Kethmori military history. Humans were fighting with weapons made from garbage. They were turning civilian equipment into instruments of war. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to feel no fear of death. Show me the psychological analysis, Zethkar demanded. Yethmore activated a holographic display. Our experts believe the humans have entered a collective state of controlled rage. They are no longer fighting for victory. They are fighting for revenge. This was completely outside alien understanding. Every other species the Kethmori had conquered fought to win or to survive. When those goals became impossible, they surrendered. But humans seemed to fight harder when winning became impossible. They had moved beyond survival into something the aliens couldn't comprehend. Back on the surface, Captain Danny Wright was leading his reduced Marine unit through the ruins of what used to be the main city on Kronos base. His men had been fighting for weeks with minimal supplies and no reinforcement. By all military logic, they should have been defeated long ago. Instead, they were stronger than ever. "Contact front," whispered Corporal Ben Taylor, pointing toward an alien checkpoint ahead. Danny studied the position. 6 alien soldiers with heavy weapons protected by energy barriers and automated defenses. A month ago, his entire battalion couldn't have taken that position. Now he was going to do it with 8 Marines and a bag of tricks Roy Mitchell had built. "Thompson, Rodriguez, circle left with the plasma mines," he ordered quietly. "Taylor, Johnson, take the magnetic charges and go right. Santos, Walsh, you're with me on the direct assault." His Marines moved without question. They had learned to trust each other completely, and they had learned that human creativity could overcome alien technology. The attack began when the plasma mines detonated under the alien vehicles. The explosions weren't large, but they were precisely placed to disable the aliens' heavy weapons. While the aliens were confused, the magnetic charges attached to their energy barriers. The devices looked like broken electronics, but they generated electromagnetic pulses that overloaded alien shield generators. Finally, Danny's assault team hit the checkpoint from 3 directions at once, using modified mining tools and pure aggression. The aliens never had a chance to coordinate their defense. Within minutes, the checkpoint was in human hands. More importantly, the aliens inside were all dead. The human resistance had stopped taking prisoners after the execution. Broadcast. The psychological impact on alien forces was devastating. War Prime Zethkar had wanted to terrorize humans into submission. Instead, he had created an enemy that felt no mercy and showed no quarter. Alien soldiers were now afraid to leave their fortified positions. Every patrol could be their last. Every mission could be a trap. Every piece of human equipment could explode without warning. Commander Yethmore was receiving reports that his troops were developing what humans would call battle fatigue. Alien soldiers who had conquered worlds were now having nightmares about human children with bombs hidden in their school supplies. "The humans are using our own strengths against us," he reported to Zethkar. "Our advanced technology makes us dependent on complex systems. When humans disable one component, entire weapon systems fail. And our superior firepower? Useless when we cannot find targets. The humans blend into the civilian population. They hide in places our sensors cannot detect. They attack from directions we do not expect." Zethkar studied the tactical displays. His forces still controlled most of the territory, but they were trapped in isolated strongholds. The humans owned everything in between. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Yethmore hesitated. In 200 years of military service, he had never faced a situation like this. "War Prime, I believe we need to consider the possibility that this campaign cannot be won using conventional methods." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Kethmori Empire had never failed to conquer a species, never been forced to consider retreat, never faced an enemy that refused to accept defeat. But humans were different. They had taken the worst the aliens could give them and turned it into fuel for their anger. They had lost every major battle and somehow made themselves stronger. As night fell over the war-torn worlds, human resistance fighters prepared for another round of attacks. They had no grand strategy, no ultimate weapon, no hope of military victory. All they had was the absolute refusal to give up, and somehow that was enough. In the darkness between the stars, something fundamental had changed in the balance of galactic power. For the first time in centuries, the unstoppable Kethmori war machine had been stopped, not by superior technology or brilliant strategy, but by simple human. 6 months after the day that was supposed to mark humanity's defeat, something impossible was happening across 3 star systems. The humans were winning. Colonel Lisa Harper stood in what used to be War Prime Zethkar's command center on Kronos base. The alien leader sat in restraints, his black eyes staring at her with something she had never seen in an alien before: fear. "You wanted to study how humans fight," Lisa said quietly. "Now you get to see it up close." Through the windows of the command center, Zethkar could see human soldiers moving through the base. They were not the organized army he had expected to face. These were guerrilla fighters who had learned to make weapons from scrap metal and turn every piece of technology into a tool of war. A young human soldier, barely old enough to be called an adult, walked past carrying a device that looked like a children's toy. Zethkar knew it was actually a remote-controlled explosive that could destroy an alien tank. "Your species fascinates our scientists," Lisa continued. "You conquered 43 different alien races. Every one of them surrendered when they realized they could not win." Zethkar remained silent, but his eyes followed every human who passed by the window. "But humans don't work that way," Lisa said. "When we realize we can't win, we decide to change the rules." In space above the planet, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a ship that should not have existed. The UES Defiant had been destroyed months ago when he rammed it into the alien flagship, but Chief Engineer Roy Mitchell had somehow built a new vessel from the wreckage of both ships. The new Defiant was not beautiful. It was a patchwork of human and alien technology, held together with determination and welding equipment. But it worked, and it was leading a fleet of similar vessels. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 12 more alien ships," reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, who had somehow survived the collision and explosion months earlier. Jake looked at the tactical display. The alien fleet that had once numbered 500 ships was down to less than 50. The rest had been destroyed, captured, or had simply fled the system. "Tell them the same thing we told the others," Jake said. "Unconditional surrender only. No negotiations." This was not the way wars usually ended. Typically, when one side was clearly losing, both sides would negotiate terms to minimize further casualties. But humans had stopped being interested in minimizing casualties after the execution broadcast. Down on the planet's surface, Dr. Elena Foster was documenting the final stages of what historians would later call the most unusual military victory in galactic history. The human forces never actually defeated the aliens in a traditional sense, she dictated to her recording device. They simply refused to lose until the aliens gave up trying to win. Her research had revealed the key difference between humans and every other species the Kethmori had encountered. Other races fought until defeat became certain, then surrendered to preserve their lives. Humans fought until defeat became certain, then fought harder. The aliens had superior technology, greater numbers, and more experience, she continued. But they had one critical weakness. They expected their enemies to behave logically. In his laboratory on Haven's Gate, Roy Mitchell was showing a group of alien prisoners how humans had turned their own technology against them. The aliens watched in horror as he demonstrated how a simple mining tool could be converted into a weapon that could punch through their best armor. "The secret," Roy explained to his alien audience, "is that we don't think like engineers. We think like humans." He picked up what looked like a broken communication device. "You see scrap metal. We see the components for a remote-controlled bomb." One of the alien prisoners, a scientist named Kethvel, spoke up. "But that is not what the device was designed for. You are using it incorrectly." Roy smiled. "That's exactly the point. You think there's a right way and a wrong way to use technology. We think there's whatever way works." The aliens had been so focused on building better weapons that they had forgotten the most important rule of warfare. The side that adapts fastest usually wins. In the underground tunnels beneath the main city, Sergeant Maria Santos was training a new generation of human fighters. The war was essentially over, but everyone knew there would be other threats in the future. "The most important lesson," she told her students, "is that humans are not like other species. We don't know when to quit." One of the students, a teenager named Alex who had lost his family in the alien bombardment, raised his hand. "But Sergeant, what if we're really outmatched? What if the enemy is stronger, faster, and smarter than us?" Maria thought about the past 6 months, about Captain Wright, who had held impossible positions with nothing but determination, about Private Walsh, who had survived behind enemy lines for weeks on contaminated water and pure stubbornness, about all the human soldiers who had kept fighting when any logical analysis said they should surrender. "Then we get creative," she said simply. War Prime Zethkar was learning this lesson firsthand in his cell on Chronospace. Colonel Harper had decided that instead of executing him, she would force him to watch human reconstruction efforts. Every day, he saw humans rebuilding their cities, using a mixture of their own technology and captured alien equipment. They were not just repairing the damage from the war, they were building something better. "Your people destroyed our colonies," Harper told him during one of her visits. "But you also gave us access to technology we never would have developed on our own." Zethkar watched as human engineers installed alien power systems in human buildings. The result was not elegant, but it was effective. "We are learning from this war," Harper continued. "When the next alien empire decides to attack humanity, we will be ready." The War Prime felt something he had never experienced before, the certainty that his species had awakened something they could not control. News of humanity's victory was spreading throughout the galaxy. Species that had been conquered by the Keth Mori centuries ago were beginning their own rebellions. The unstoppable alien empire was facing uprisings on dozens of worlds. The Galactic Council, which had abandoned humanity at the beginning of the war, was now requesting emergency meetings. Ambassador Chen Wei had been busy for weeks, fielding calls from alien governments that suddenly wanted to be friends with the species that had done the impossible. President Victoria Stone stood in the rebuilt Capitol building on Earth, reading reports from across human space. The casualty numbers were staggering. 60% of all human military forces had been killed or wounded during the war, but humanity had survived. More than that, they had won. "Madam President," her aide announced, "the Galactic Council is requesting permission to send a diplomatic mission." Victoria looked out the window at the construction crews rebuilding the city, humans and alien prisoners working side by side, turning the ruins of war into something new. "Tell them they're welcome to visit," she said, "but make sure they understand the new rules." "What rules, Madam President?" "Humanity is no longer just another minor species. We are the race that refused to lose. Anyone who wants to be our enemy should remember what happened to the last group that tried." On Kronos base, Colonel Harper was giving Zethkar one final lesson in human nature. She had brought him to the memorial wall, where the names of every human killed in the war were carved in stone. "You wanted to teach us fear," she said, pointing to the thousands of names. "Instead, you taught us that we are stronger than we thought." Zethkar looked at the memorial. Each name represented a human who had died rather than surrender. Each name was a reminder that this species would fight to the last person rather than accept defeat. "Your empire conquered 43 races," Harper continued. "But those races fought to live. We fought to win. That made all the difference." As the sun set over the rebuilt city, human children played in the streets where alien soldiers had once marched. They were building toys from pieces of alien technology, turning instruments of war into games and entertainment. Dr. Foster watched them and smiled. The children were already learning the most important human trait, the ability to take something designed to hurt them and turn it into something useful. In her final report, she wrote, "Humanity won this war not because we were stronger or smarter than our enemies. We won because when the universe told us we had to lose, we decided the universe was wrong. The war was over. Humanity had survived its first test as a galactic power, but more importantly, they had learned something about themselves that would serve them well in the future. When faced with impossible odds, humans don't calculate the probability of victory. They simply refuse to accept defeat. And sometimes, that refusal is enough to change the universe."